Story 1. My sister, who is 15 years old, has always been selfish, even since she was a child. She would never share or do anything for anyone else. Yet she would expect everyone to do everything for her. As a small child, that's understandable, but she has never grown out of it. My parents have always dismissed this as just her personality. My sister has always been rude to me specifically. She demands that I do things for her, make her food, pay for her things, and handle various other tasks. But if I ask for the same, she shouts at me. I don't remember the last time she has done anything for anyone out of the kindness of her heart. She just shouts. There have been times when I have been violently ill and bedridden due to a chronic illness. When I asked her if she could get me water, she shouted at me, even though I make her food and drinks multiple times a day, because if I don't, she simply won't eat. She is also rude about everything. Anytime someone talks to her, she has a tone or shouts. She is so difficult to have a conversation with. I say nice things, and she is just rude to me, screaming and being awful. My parents say nothing, but if I dare speak half as harshly as she does, I get reprimanded. I've mentioned countless times the favoritism and how they see her as a perfect little angel. They coddle her, rarely tell her off, and have never disciplined her, yet they have always disciplined me. They've acted like I was overreacting. She is so manipulative. She always plays the victim and turns my parents against me when she is in the wrong. I told my parents that one day, people are going to have enough of her in the real world, and I will have to cut contact if her behavior continues. Again, they didn't want to listen and just thought it was due to sisterly love, and that it's normal sisterly behavior, not concerning behavior. However, this week, we went to a family reunion, and my cousins, a 23-year-old male and a 12-year-old male, humbled her. She was exhibiting her usual toxic behavior. She was talking to them rudely and rolling her eyes at them, as she does every day to people. My 23-year-old cousin wasn't having it. He told her, "Listen, if you keep acting like this in the real world, you are going to get slapped," and that she needs to cut her attitude. My sister was just rudely like, "I'm sure, okay?" as if he was stupid. My 12-year-old cousin added that he always feels like she judges him because she always glares at him. Obviously, my parents couldn't deny this, and it was actually a significant wake-up call. They realized her behavior isn't just toward immediate family and isn't normal to outsiders. They saw that she would behave this way toward people she isn't as close with, not just her parents and sister. Now, my parents are telling me that I shouldn't get her food and water, and she needs to do some things for herself. They are forcing her to be independent and have actually been disciplining her when she is toxic. She is not taking it well and has been screaming at me, even though it's not my fault, and I haven't done anything. It's a bit late, but I'm glad they are finally putting their foot down and no longer seeing her as a perfect little angel who can do no wrong. I just hope they actually stick to it. Story 2. My old TV finally broke down, so I got a new smart TV. A couple weeks later, I realized that no one in the family watches any TV channels. Everyone goes for streaming content. I decided that it's not worth it to pay for the TV connection anymore. Now, my TV connection is added into my phone plan, along with my internet as well, so disconnecting it was not straightforward. It was a custom plan with its own dedicated relationship team. It took several calls to the team to find a resolution, which was to convert the TV connection to a prepaid one and then stop recharging. After the conversion was done, I got messages for a few weeks to recharge, and then finally a message to return the set-top box. I responded to that, and in a few days, the box was collected from my place. Good riddance. Or so I thought. Next started calls from random call centers for recharging. It felt different from the dedicated relationship team. I Googled and found out that this had become the practice in my country. The company had outsourced this part of the support to a third party, and they simply checked from the printed database about people who had a connection, but did not recharge last month. Since my disconnection was in the middle of the month, and their printed database was from the beginning, they did not have this updated info. I tried my best to inform them about this to no avail. I started talking to the callers, informing them of the fake problem my TV was having connecting to the set-top box, and that multiple support requests have fallen on deaf ears. Also started recording the calls. Third caller took it seriously and booked tech support. Got a call from a field tech within hours. He came by. I greeted him with drinks and informed him about the real issue. We had a good laugh. He suggested that I keep it up a few more times for good measure. After 8 tech support visits, finally they got the message. Got a call from a supervisor asking why I was booking tech support when clearly I didn't have a connection anymore. I mailed him the call recordings. He was pretty annoyed, but I stopped getting calls so much. Any call I get now rarely, like once a couple weeks. I just read from the same script, and if someone takes it seriously enough to try to book tech support, they get a short note against my ID to not bother this gentleman. Story 3. 2 days ago, my sister's wedding took place, and it was nothing short of a roller coaster. Her bride, whom we'll call Samantha for privacy, is a wonderful woman. For context, Samantha's entire family practices Mormonism, which is crucial to understanding the story. Just days before the wedding, a relative of Samantha's passed away. While I'm unsure of their exact relationship, Samantha appeared unaffected by the loss leading up to the big day. The real chaos began when Samantha's parents, who strongly oppose same-sex marriage due to their religious beliefs, decided to use the funeral as a means to sabotage the wedding. They scheduled the funeral on the same day, creating a scramble to figure out who from their side would even show up. We managed to confirm that Samantha's sister would be there, and we hoped for a smooth event. But then, about an hour before we were supposed to walk my sister down the aisle, Samantha's sister received an unexpected call from their mother. This call came after we had already been forced to cut one table from the guest list because another relative backed out at the last minute, citing a so-called great flood that never happened. Don't feel too sorry for him, he's notorious for fabricating excuses, and I doubt there was any flood at all. The mother, who had originally refused to attend due to her religious opposition to same-sex marriage, suddenly decided to show up at the 11th hour. Meanwhile, Yappy, the other bridesmaid, had already started causing problems. She wouldn't stop talking and was creating a disruptive atmosphere even before the ceremony began. Samantha's maid of honor had to step in and calm her down just to keep things from falling apart. By this point, Samantha was already on edge, and learning that her mother was coming pushed her over the edge. I'd love to say there was a dramatic confrontation with the entitled mother, but fortunately, that didn't happen. Instead, she sat through the entire ceremony with a stone-cold expression, neither showing discontent nor enthusiasm. Her demeanor was one of absolute apathy. As the night progressed, Yappy continued to be a major annoyance, incessantly talking and ruining the vibe. The maid of honor, having dealt with her antics all evening, eventually came over to our table and declared, "I'm done with this." The person originally slated to walk my sister down the aisle was absent due to the funeral and what might have been a forced religious obligation. In the end, Samantha's sister stepped up to walk my sister down the aisle and share the first dance. The ultimate twist. We later discovered that the only reason the mother showed up was to avoid losing contact with her grandchildren, Samantha's nieces, who were also the flower girls and were walking the dogs down the aisle. Because what's a lesbian wedding without dogs? Samantha would call them her kids. The nieces are too kind to cut off their grandmother, and I don't think they'll actually do it. But then again, right now, it seems they care more about Samantha than about their own grandmother, so it could go either way. Story 4. I am stuck with a neighbor who thinks she's entitled to use my security cameras for her own benefit. Let me tell you how this whole mess started. It all began when I visited my aunt's house a few weeks ago. She had these really cool outdoor cameras installed all around her property. I was amazed by all the features they had: night vision, motion detection, two-way audio, you name it. After seeing how much peace of mind they gave her, I decided to get some for my own house. So, I did my research, found a good deal, and had them installed. The cameras were positioned strategically around my house, covering all the important areas. I felt pretty good about it, thinking I'd made my home a bit safer. But then, just a few days after the installation, I heard a knock on my door. It was my neighbor, this middle-aged woman who I'll call Karen because, trust me, she fits the stereotype perfectly. She had this weird smile on her face that should have been my first warning. Karen: "Hey there, neighbor. I couldn't help but notice those new cameras you've got up. They look pretty fancy." Me: "Oh, yeah. I just had them installed for some extra security." Karen: "That's great. I've been thinking about getting some myself. What kind of features do they have?" I didn't think much of it at the time, so I told her about the cameras and even sent her the ad from the company that installed them. I figured maybe she was interested in getting her own set. Karen: "Wow, those sound amazing. You know, I had an idea." That's when things took a turn for the bizarre. Karen: "How about you adjust a few of your camera angles so they can cover my house too?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. I mean, who asks something like that, right? Me, chuckling: "Good one, Karen. You had me going for a second there." Karen, frowning: "I'm serious. We should do the neighborly thing here. If you move the cameras a bit, they can cover my property too. That way, if anything happens at my house, we'll have footage." I stood there, mouth hanging open, trying to process what she was saying. But she wasn't done yet. Karen: "Oh, and of course, I'll need access to the camera feed too. We can both have the added security. It's a win-win." Now, I'm generally a nice person, but this was crossing a line. I tried to let her down gently. Me: "I'm sorry, Karen, but that's not possible. These are my personal security cameras, and they're set up specifically for my property. If you want coverage of your house, you should really consider getting your own set." I thought that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Karen, voice rising: "What do you mean? No. That's so selfish. We're supposed to look out for each other in this neighborhood. I can't believe you'd be so unhelpful." Me: "Karen, it's not about being unhelpful. These are private cameras for my home. I'm not comfortable giving anyone else access to them." Karen, practically shouting: "Now well, if that's how you want to be, fine. I'll just have to contact the homeowners association about this. I'm sure they'll have something to say about your lack of community spirit." With that, she stormed off, leaving me standing in my doorway, completely baffled. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Who threatens to report someone to the homeowners association for not sharing their personal security system? I decided to ignore her ridiculous threat. I mean, what could the homeowners association possibly do? Force me to share my cameras? Yeah, right? But Karen wasn't done yet. Oh no, she was just getting started. The very next day, I was sitting in my living room when I got an alert on my phone. One of my cameras had detected motion. I opened the app, expecting to see a stray cat or something. Instead, what I saw made my jaw drop. There was Karen, in broad daylight, messing with one of my cameras. She was wearing a face mask, probably thinking it would hide her identity. Newsflash: Karen, I know what you look like, mask or not. She was trying to adjust the angle of the camera, pointing it towards her house. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was this woman seriously trying to redirect my security cameras to her property? I watched in disbelief as she stretched up, balancing on her tiptoes to reach the camera. That's when karma decided to step in. My dog, who had been napping in the yard, suddenly woke up. He's a big, friendly golden retriever, but he can look pretty intimidating when he wants to. He saw this stranger messing with our house and decided to investigate. He bounded over, barking loudly. Karen, startled by the sudden noise, lost her balance. She stumbled backward, tripped over her own feet, and fell flat on her back. My dog, thinking this was some new game, ran circles around her, still barking excitedly. Karen scrambled to her feet, limping slightly, and ran back to her house as fast as she could. My dog watched her go, tail wagging, probably wondering why the new friend didn't want to play anymore. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I'd just seen. Then I burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. The whole situation was just so ridiculous. But once I calmed down, I realized I needed to deal with this. The next day, I walked over to Karen's house. I figured we needed to have a serious talk about boundaries and, not trying to steal other people's security footage. I knocked on her door, and after a moment, she opened it. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Hi Karen, we need to talk about what happened yesterday. Karen, trying to look confused, what are you talking about? Nothing happened yesterday. Karen, I saw you trying to adjust my camera. You fell and hurt yourself, remember? Karen, face turning red, I did no such thing. How dare you accuse me of something like that? Karen, I have it on video. You were wearing a mask, but I know it was you. Karen, sputtering, that's an invasion of privacy. You can't just record people without their permission. It's my property, Karen. And you were the one trying to mess with my cameras. Look, I'm not here to argue. I just want you to pay for the damage you caused to my camera. Karen, trying to close the door, this is ridiculous. I'm not paying for anything. Leave me alone or I'll call the police. As she was about to slam the door in my face, I noticed something. She was limping, favoring her right leg, the same one she'd landed on when she fell. Karen, you're limping. You hurt yourself when you fell yesterday, didn't you? Karen, stumbling slightly, I don't know what you're talking about. I tripped in my kitchen, that's all. Sighing, Karen, please. Can we just be honest here? I have video evidence of what happened. All I'm asking is for you to pay for the repairs to my camera. After that, we can forget this whole thing ever happened. Karen, deflating a little, fine. How much is it? I told her the cost, and after some grumbling, she agreed to pay. I think she realized she didn't have much choice, given the evidence I had. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't help but shake my head. All of this drama, just because Karen couldn't accept a simple no and buy her own security cameras. I made a mental note to be a bit more cautious around her in the future. Who knows what other crazy ideas she might come up with. Back at home, I gave my dog an extra treat. After all, he was the real hero of this story. His perfectly timed bark had not only scared off Karen, but had given me the evidence I needed to confront her. I patted his head, thinking that maybe I should install a few more cameras, just in case. You never know when you might need to catch an entitled neighbor in the act. As for Karen, I haven't heard much from her since. I see her sometimes, walking around the neighborhood, always giving my house a wide berth. I guess she learned her lesson about respecting other people's property. Or maybe she's just plotting her next move. With neighbors like Karen, you can never be too sure. One thing's for certain, though. I'm definitely keeping my security cameras. Not just for burglars anymore, but for over-entitled neighbors too. Who would have thought that neighbor security would become part of my home protection plan? Life sure has a way of surprising you sometimes. Story 5. My uncle takes advantage of my grandparents, and it makes me so angry. This has been going on for over 20 years. They are now in their mid-70s, and my grandmother has major health problems. She doesn't feel well most days. First off, he's 47 years old and has never had a place of his own. He has no physical or mental disabilities that would prevent him from living independently. He's never had a bank account. My grandparents keep his money in an envelope and give it to him when he needs it or buy him whatever he wants. My grandmother says they can't let him have the money because he's too nice of a person and would give all his money to friends or women. I told them that he is a grown man, and if he can't handle his money responsibly, that's his issue. She responded that he's not an adult yet. I asked her, then at what age will he become an adult? She said she isn't sure. He hasn't had a job in about 10 years, but somehow she still claims he has money left over from a job he had at an auto shop 10 years ago. He's on and off drugs, though they are in denial and say he isn't. I have personally seen him going through withdrawal symptoms. Some of the other family members know, but they won't confront my grandparents about it. I do, and I think that's why we argue a lot. One of his ex-girlfriends from many years ago, who is actually a great person, contacted me about 2 years ago. She told me that he is indeed using heroin and pills. She even asked my grandmother if they could please do an intervention. My grandmother got very upset and insisted that nothing bad was going on. My grandparents say they can't put him in a rehabilitation center because they can't afford it. He and his ex ended up breaking up and going their separate ways because she said she couldn't deal with his issues. I stay in touch with her. When he is home, my grandparents take his keys because he hangs with the wrong crowd who try to take his money and drive his truck. He ended up selling his truck, and I suggested they use that money to put him in a rehabilitation center. They said they weren't going to do that to him because he doesn't do anything wrong. He ended up buying a new truck with the money. They eventually give him his keys back when he starts to get angry once his withdrawal symptoms are over and he's needing a fix again. He gets very agitated in that moment. He only ever moves in with women, and most of the time, he's living with my grandparents if he doesn't have a woman to stay with. He hasn't had a job in many years. When he does have a job, he ends up getting fired because he stops showing up or decides he doesn't like it. My grandmother will literally call in sick for him because he refuses to get out of bed. She will lie to his boss and say he isn't feeling well. He sleeps all day and all night, only waking up to use the bathroom, watch television, or eat their food. He will disappear for weeks on end, then come back clearly going through withdrawal. My grandmother insists he just has a stomach virus. I've asked her, so he gets a stomach virus every few weeks? She said yes. They are completely fine with him not working, but they have extremely high expectations for me. If I even use a day of paid time off or call in sick, I get a lecture. You're just wanting to sit around and be lazy. If you get fired, we aren't helping you with anything. You should never be missing a day of work. He has currently been living with a woman for about 3 years. She recently kicked him out, and my grandmother said she feels so bad for him. My grandmother always says she wishes he could find a good woman to take care of him. I tell her that it's not a woman's responsibility to take care of a grown man. The woman eventually let him move back in, but my grandmother said, she tries to take his money and uses him, so I have to keep it, or he will give it all away. In reality, I think the woman probably just wants him to help pay bills there and get a job, and she asks for money for bills. My grandmother says, he's such a kind-hearted person, he would give the shirt off his back to anyone, and people take advantage of that. For about a year now, my grandparents have been doing all his grocery shopping for him and delivering it to where he lives, about 20 minutes away. I've seen the texts he sends her, and he texts them that he's needing groceries again and sends them a list of what he wants. They go and buy it and deliver it to him once a week. My grandmother said his truck is broken down, so he can't get food. I suggested that he use a grocery delivery service from a store like Walmart instead of them having to drive back and forth every week. She said, he doesn't know how to do that, that's too hard for him. He texts them things like, I guess I'm going to have to start riding a bike to get food. But it's so hot outside, I will probably get sick. It's major guilt tripping. He says things like, I have the best parents anyone could ever ask for. I told my grandmother that he has it made. He doesn't have to work. They are his personal shoppers, so he doesn't even have to go to the grocery store or place orders for groceries. He doesn't even have to pay his own bills. They process the payments for him. She said, he doesn't know how to do any of that stuff. I said, well, I'm sure he can be taught. Allow him to learn and grow up. She responded, he wouldn't be able to understand how to do it. I'm extremely concerned about the day they become incapable of doing these things for him, or when the day comes that they pass away. The rest of our family isn't going to do all this for him. He will truly crumble. He doesn't have to lift a finger for anything. They handle all his bills, car insurance, phone bill, etc., so he's never had to make payments on bills, and he's never had a bank account. But I can tell you one thing, the day they become incapable, I will not allow this to happen anymore. He will finally have to take responsibility for his life and do things for himself. Story 6. I've been homeless for a while now, but things are finally starting to look up. I managed to find a part-time job, left the city I was in, and moved far north. Things are slowly improving, and I'm grateful for that. One thing that's probably been a blessing is that I don't do drugs or drink. It's helped me keep a clear head through all of this. Right now, I'm still living in the woods, but now it's in the really deep woods. I haven't seen a single person since I got here, which is both peaceful and a bit lonely. But it's okay. I'm making it work. The thing is, even though I'm living off the grid, I still need to keep my belongings charged and access the internet. That's where the library comes in. It's been a lifeline for me, providing the resources I need to stay connected and keep my devices powered up. Today started like any other day. I made my way to the library, found a quiet spot, and settled in. I used the Wi-Fi, plugged in my phone and battery banks, and went about my business. No problem, just like always. I stayed for about 2 hours, doing what I needed to do. When it was time to leave, I bent down to go under the desk and grab my battery banks. That's when everything went sideways. A lady nearby saw me and suddenly started screaming, "You can't do that." I froze, completely caught off guard. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, she was already scooting over to the librarian's desk. In her mind, she'd caught me red-handed, stealing the computers. Can you believe it? I could hear her telling the librarian, "That man is stealing the computer." I stood there, feeling like a deer in the headlights, my eyes wide with surprise. I know I'm a big, scary-looking bearded man, but come on, who steals a computer from a library in broad daylight? The woman came stomping back over to me with the librarian in tow. The librarian, trying to maintain a professional demeanor, asked me, "What are you doing, sir?" I managed to find my voice and said, "I don't know what's going on. I was just unplugging my power bank." I held up the 4 battery banks in my hands as proof. The librarian looked at them, then at me, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. I glanced at the woman who started all this, and honestly, it hurt. It hurts every single time something like this happens. The suspicion, the judgment, the assumption that because I look a certain way, I must be up to no good. The woman, who I'm just going to call Karen, because that's exactly how she was acting, wasn't backing down. Karen, he was under the desk. What else could he be doing but stealing? "Me, ma'am, I was just getting my things. These are my battery banks. I come here to charge them." Karen, scoffing, "Battery banks? Why would you need so many? That's suspicious." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I didn't want to cause a scene or get kicked out of the library. This place was too important to me. I live off the grid. I need these to keep my phone and other devices charged. The librarian, bless her heart, seemed to be coming around to my side of things. She looked at Karen with a slightly exasperated expression. "Librarian, ma'am, it appears this gentleman was just retrieving his personal belongings. We haven't had any issues with theft, and our computers are securely fastened to the desks." But Karen wasn't having it. She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Karen, well, he shouldn't be crawling around under desks. It's indecent and scary for other patrons." I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment. I hadn't thought about how it might look to others. I was just doing what I needed to do to survive. I'm sorry if I scared anyone. That wasn't my intention at all. I'll be more careful in the future." The librarian gave me a sympathetic look. "Librarian, sir, in the future, please feel free to ask for assistance if you need to retrieve items from under the desk. We're here to help." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. But Karen still wasn't satisfied. "Karen, you should check his bag. I bet he has more stolen goods in there." Now that was going too far. I clutched my backpack close, feeling defensive. Everything I owned was in that bag. "Ma'am, please. I haven't stolen anything. This is all I have in the world." The librarian, clearly tired of this whole situation, turned to Karen. "Librarian, ma'am, we have no reason to believe this man has stolen anything. If you're uncomfortable, you're welcome to use a computer in a different area of the library." Karen's face turned red, and she spluttered indignantly. "Karen, well, I was just trying to help keep this place safe. Don't come crying to me when all your computers go missing." With that, she stormed off, leaving me standing there with the librarian. I felt drained, like all the energy had been sucked out of me. Librarian, I'm sorry about that. Sir, are you all right? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. The librarian hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, her voice low and kind. Librarian, if you need any assistance or resources, please don't hesitate to ask. We have information about local shelters and support services if you're interested. Her offer was genuine, and I appreciated it, but I also felt a twinge of shame. I knew she was just trying to help, but it was a reminder of how far I'd fallen. Me, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm doing okay for now. The librarian nodded, respecting my privacy. Librarian, all right? Well, you're always welcome here. Don't let what happened today discourage you from coming back. I thanked her again and gathered my things. As I left the library, I could feel eyes on me. The encounter with Karen had drawn attention, and now people were looking at me differently. Some with pity, others with suspicion. I kept my head down and walked quickly, eager to get back to the solitude of my woods. On the long walk back to my camp, I had plenty of time to think about what had happened. It wasn't the first time I'd been judged for my appearance or my situation, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. But it never got easier. I thought about Karen and wondered what her life was like. Did she have a home to go to? A family? Did she realize how lucky she was? I tried not to be angry with her, even though part of me wanted to be. Maybe she'd had bad experiences in the past that made her suspicious. Or maybe she was just one of those people who always assumed the worst about others. As I trudged through the woods, my backpack heavy with my freshly charged devices, I felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for the library and the kind librarian, sadness at being misunderstood and judged, frustration at my current situation, but also a glimmer of hope. I reminded myself that things were getting better. I had a part-time job now. I wasn't in the city anymore, dealing with the daily stresses of urban homelessness. I was making progress, even if it was slow. When I finally reached my campsite, hidden deep in the woods where no one could find me, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Here, I didn't have to worry about people's judgments or suspicious glares. Here, I could just be. I set up my tarp shelter and settled in for the night. As I lay there, looking up at the stars peeking through the trees, I thought about my next steps. I knew I couldn't live in the woods forever. Someday, I wanted to have a real home again, a place where I didn't have to worry about charging my phone or where I'd sleep at night. But for now, this was my reality, and despite encounters like the one with Karen, I was determined to make the best of it. I'd keep going to the library, keep charging my devices, keep looking for opportunities to improve my situation. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to help people understand that homelessness doesn't define a person. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a mental note to be more careful at the library in the future. Maybe I'd ask for help retrieving my things from under the desk, like the librarian suggested. Or maybe I'd find a less conspicuous spot to plug in my chargers. Whatever happened, I knew I'd face it with the same resilience that had gotten me this far. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of us can do: keep moving forward, one day at a time. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and sunlight filtering through the leaves. Another day, another chance to make things better. I packed up my few belongings and headed out, ready to face whatever the world might throw at me. As I walked, I thought about going back to the library. Part of me was hesitant after yesterday's incident, but I knew I couldn't let one bad experience keep me away. That library was my lifeline, my connection to the world beyond these woods. I decided to go, but this time I'd be more prepared. I'd explain my situation to the librarian right away, ask if there was a better place for me to charge my things. Maybe we could work something out that wouldn't draw attention or make anyone uncomfortable. When I arrived at the library, I took a deep breath before walking in. The same librarian from yesterday was at the desk. When she saw me, she gave me a small smile. Librarian, good morning, sir. How can I help you today? I approached the desk, feeling nervous but determined. Me, Good morning. I wanted to talk to you about yesterday, and about my situation. The librarian nodded encouragingly, and I found myself pouring out my story. I told her about losing my home, about living in the woods, about how the library was my only connection to the modern world. As I talked, I saw understanding and compassion in her eyes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. Librarian, thank you for sharing that with me. I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you. Let's see what we can do to make your visits here more comfortable. We spent the next few minutes working out a plan. She showed me a quiet corner of the library where I could charge my things without drawing attention. She even offered to keep an eye on my stuff if I needed to step away. As we finished talking, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small bit of understanding in a world that often seemed cold and uncaring. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. Librarian, you're welcome. And please, if there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask. We're here to help everyone in our community, regardless of their living situation. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. As I turned to go to my new spot, I saw Karen from yesterday enter the library. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw recognition flicker across her face, followed by something else. Was it shame? Regret? I couldn't be sure. But instead of causing a scene or running away, I decided to do something different. I walked up to her. Good morning, ma'am. I just wanted to say that I understand why you were concerned yesterday. I hope you know I meant no harm. Karen looked taken aback, clearly not expecting this. She stammered for a moment before responding. Karen, I may have overreacted. I'm sorry if I caused you any trouble. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was something. I nodded and gave her a small smile before heading to my spot in the library. As I settled in and plugged in my devices, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I was still homeless. Yes, life was still hard. But in this moment, in this library, I felt a little less alone, a little more understood. I knew there would be more Karens in my future, more misunderstandings and judgments. But I also knew there would be more kind librarians, more moments of connection and understanding. And as long as I had that, I had hope. So I opened up my charged phone, connected to the Wi-Fi, and started my day. Another day of job searching, of learning, of trying to better my situation. Another day of not giving up, no matter what life threw my way. Because that's what it means to be homeless, but not hopeless. That's what it means to keep going, even when the world seems against you. And that's what I'll keep doing, one day at a time, until I finally find my way home.